I 38M, never thought I'd be sharing this story, but after lurking on this sub for months, I figure maybe writing this all out might help me process everything that's happened. Been with Jessica, 36F, for almost 9 years, married for 8 of them. Always thought we had a decent thing going. Not perfect, but whose marriage is? Some background on me, I've been working my way up in financial consulting for the last 15 years. Started at the bottom, no college degree, just hustled my ass off and learned everything I could. My old man always said education comes in many forms. He was a blue-collar guy who worked with his hands his whole life, but was one of the smartest people I've ever known. He taught me that respect is earned through actions, not words. I built a solid reputation for being the guy who can handle difficult clients that nobody else wants to deal with. The problem solver. The fixer. Physically, I've always been in pretty good shape. I hit the gym 4 to 5 times a week, played rugby in college, and dabbled in amateur MMA in my 20s. Nothing professional, but I won more fights than I lost. I'm not huge or anything, but I've always been proud of staying fit. 6 feet 1 inch and around 190 pounds, mostly muscle. Never had issues with confidence or self-esteem. At least not until the last few years of my marriage. Jessica works in pharmaceutical sales, one of those jobs where your appearance and ability to schmooze matters more than actual knowledge of the products. She's always talking about networking and making the right connections to climb the corporate ladder. The kind of person who judges restaurants by whether the right people might see her there. Let me get to what happened. Last Friday, she insisted we host this dinner party for her coworkers and their spouses. It's important for my career, she said in that tone that meant there was no room for discussion. I'm not big on hosting parties, I'd rather be watching the game with a couple buddies, but I figured it was important to her, so why not? Spent all day busting my ass to make everything perfect, cleaned the whole house top to bottom, cooked a 3-course meal. I've always enjoyed cooking, something my dad taught me, made sure the wine was properly chilled. The works. Made this roast that takes like 6 hours to cook properly, homemade appetizers, even baked a damn cheesecake from scratch. Evening starts off fine. Everyone's having appetizers, making small talk, complimenting my cooking. These pharmaceutical types, all dressed like they just stepped out of a catalog, perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect everything, small talk. I start thinking maybe this won't suck after all. I can play the good host for one night. Then Jessica gets to her 3rd glass of wine. I know her patterns, beer makes her sleepy, liquor makes her angry, but wine makes her mean. The conversation somehow gets to relationships, and she gets this look on her face, this smile I've learned means trouble is coming. It's like watching a car crash about to happen but being unable to stop it. She turns to her colleagues and says, her voice way louder than it needed to be, "You know what's funny? When we first met, I thought he would be this amazing catch. Tall, successful, impressive in all areas." She emphasized all, like she was in some bad comedy routine. I'm immediately on edge. I know where this is heading. Her colleague's husband asks, and he isn't? Everyone laughs, thinking it's just married couple banter. Then she holds up her hand, pinching her thumb and index finger together with barely any space between them, and says, "Some things don't measure up to expectations." The whole table erupts in laughter while I'm sitting there with my face burning red. But she wasn't even done. Honestly, it's like being married to a teenage boy, quick to start, quicker to finish, if you know what I mean. More laughter. Sometimes I wonder if I should buy him a booster seat for dinner. One of her female coworkers tried changing the subject, probably feeling how uncomfortable this was getting, but Jessica kept going. No, really, it's fine. We all have our crosses to bear. Mine's just smaller than most. Then she raised her glass in this mocking toast. I just sat there frozen, my food untouched, my hands gripping my napkin so hard my knuckles turned white. The conversation finally moved on, but the damage was done. I could see it in everyone's eyes, pity, embarrassment, that uncomfortable awareness you can't unsee. My manhood, my confidence, my dignity, all laid out as a joke at my own dinner table. The worst part? This wasn't even the first time she'd done something like this. It was just the first time she'd done it in front of people I'd have to face again. I remember thinking, I cooked all this food, cleaned this house, and this is how she treats me? But like always, I swallowed it down, smiled through it, because that's what men are supposed to do, right? Suck it up. Don't make a scene. But something broke in me that night. Something that wouldn't be fixed. What hurt the most wasn't just the humiliation, it was realizing that the person who was supposed to be my closest ally, my partner, thought so little of me that she'd use my most private insecurities as dinner entertainment. I somehow made it through the rest of dinner on autopilot, clearing plates, refilling drinks, forcing smiles, making sure everyone had coffee and dessert. Playing the perfect host while dying inside. But behind my smile, something was breaking, something fundamental was shifting in how I saw my marriage, my wife, and myself. After everyone left, Jessica acted like nothing happened. Kicked off her heels, flopped on the couch, and started scrolling through her phone. When I confronted her about it, she just dismissed my feelings completely. Oh, lighten up, it was just a joke. Everyone has these playful jabs at their partners. You're being too sensitive, she didn't even look up from her phone. Would you like it if I made jokes about your body in front of your colleagues? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She rolled her eyes. God, you're so dramatic. It's different for men and women. Besides, they all know I love you. Then she got up and headed to the bedroom. I'm tired. Don't stay up too late cleaning. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, I laid awake staring at the ceiling. Her words played on repeat in my mind. This wasn't the first time she'd made comments like this, but it was the first time she'd done it so publicly, so deliberately. I thought about my dad and what he taught me growing up. He was old school, believed a man should provide, protect, and persevere. He'd worked the same job for 40 years without complaining once, even when his hands got so arthritic he could barely hold a pen. Son, he told me once, the measure of a man isn't in his wallet or his pants, it's in how he carries himself when life gets heavy. Dad died 2 years ago. Cancer. Fought it like a champ right to the end, never complained, not even once. Just kept telling us not to worry, that he'd had a good life. That's the kind of man I wanted to be, the kind of husband I tried to be. I'd carried this marriage for years, taking her jabs, her criticism, her disrespect, all because I thought that's what a good husband does. 2 days after the dinner party, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. It buzzed repeatedly with incoming messages. I'd never snooped before, trust had always been important to me, even when I was the only one practicing it. But something made me look this time. The lock screen showed messages from someone saved as a J, missing you already baby, last night was incredible. Still feel you on me. When can you get away again? Need more of that ass. My hands were shaking as I picked up her phone. By some bitter coincidence, she hadn't changed her password since we'd set up each other's phones years ago. I opened the message thread and felt the room spin around me. Hundreds of messages stretched back months, explicit photos, detailed accounts of hotel meetups, plans for their next encounter. This Jim wasn't even her coworker like I'd first thought. He was some loser she met at a work conference, a part-time personal trainer who worked at her hotel's gym but mostly lived off his parents at 35. From their messages, I gathered he was living in their basement apartment and driving his dad's old car. They had inside jokes about me, about my job, about my performance in bed, about how clueless I was. The most recent messages discussed their plans for tomorrow night. Apparently I would be working late, which was news to me. But what truly destroyed me were the messages where they discussed me. He has no idea, she'd written. Jim had asked if she felt guilty. For being with a real man for once? He should thank me for staying with him this long. At least Jim knows how to use what he's got, even if all he's got is a big D and not much else. I scrolled further back, finding messages from the night of the dinner party. He just sits there and takes it, she'd written. I practically called him tiny and inadequate in front of everyone and he still served dessert with a smile. It's almost too easy. Jim responded, that's because he knows he can't do better than you. Bet he jerks off thinking about you with a real man. There were pictures too, comparing us, explicit details about how much bigger and better Jim was, how he could go all night while I couldn't last 5 minutes, how she'd come home from their meetups and lie next to me still feeling him inside her. I felt sick. I felt rage. But mostly I felt a strange, cold clarity that I hadn't felt in years. The messages went back 7 months, almost to the day, but there were references to others before Jim, mentions of a David, and someone called a T, who apparently had been of fun while it lasted. My entire marriage flashed before my eyes. All those late nights at the office, the weekend conferences, the girls' trips, had any of it been real? Had she ever been faithful? I heard the shower turn off upstairs. With mechanical precision, I took screenshots of key conversations, texted them to myself, then deleted the messages from her phone. I replaced it exactly where I'd found it, then walked to the kitchen sink and splashed cold water on my face. When she came downstairs wrapped in her robe with her hair in a towel, I was calmly making coffee. "Sleep well?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Like a baby, she replied, completely unaware that her world was about to come crashing down. This was the moment everything changed. The moment I decided to take back control of my life. The moment I started planning exactly how I would dismantle the carefully constructed world of lies she'd built around us. And let me tell you, what happened next would leave her absolutely speechless. Update 1. First, let me thank everyone for the overwhelming support on my last post. Many of you asked for an update, so here's what's happened in the 2 weeks since that dinner party revelation. After discovering Jessica's affair, I methodically prepared my exit strategy. I called my old friend Mike, asking if I could crash at his place for a few days. Mike and I go way back to high school. He's the kind of friend who would help you bury a body and never ask questions. We played rugby together, got into our share of trouble as teenagers, and he was the best man at my wedding. "Everything okay?" he asked immediately, sensing something was wrong. "Not really," I admitted. "Can't talk about it right now, but I need a place to crash for a bit." "My house is your house, brother," he said without hesitation. "Want me to bring beer?" "Maybe tomorrow," I said. "Tonight I need a clear head." Next, I contacted Janet, reputed to be the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. Her firm's tagline was literally, "We don't get even, we get everything." After hearing the briefest outline of my situation, she agreed to see me immediately. "This is an extremely strong case," Janet said, reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. "The infidelity is well documented, and from what you've described, there's a clear pattern of emotional abuse. What interests me most is the timing of her public humiliation attempts coinciding with her affair. Classic projection behavior." Following Janet's advice, I began securing my assets. I opened new accounts at a different bank, documented everything of value in the house, and prepared detailed records of her infidelity. But I didn't stop there. Remember how I mentioned Jim was living in his parents' basement? Well, it turns out his father is a pastor at a local church. That information proved particularly useful. I anonymously sent carefully selected screenshots of Jim's messages to his parents' church. Nothing identifying Jessica directly, but enough that his parents would know exactly what their precious boy had been up to, breaking up a marriage while living under their roof and preaching Christian values on Sundays. The fallout was swift. Through the grapevine, I heard Jim's parents kicked him out of their basement apartment. Apparently, living rent-free while destroying marriages didn't align with their Christian values. Jim was forced to move in with his brother 2 states away. Meanwhile, back at home, I maintained perfect normalcy. I went to work, came home on time, even cooked dinner as usual. Jessica continued texting Jim right next to me on the couch, smiling at her phone screen. "Good news at work?" I asked casually. "Just a project coming together," she replied without looking up. "Nothing you'd understand." I nodded and sipped my bourbon, studying her face, this stranger I'd shared my life with for 9 years. The woman who had systematically destroyed my self-worth while betraying me in the most fundamental way possible. "I love you," I said, testing the words. She glanced up briefly. "Love you too," she responded automatically before returning to her phone. That moment of practiced, empty routine made everything crystal clear. The next phase of my plan involved moving essential belongings to Mike's place while Jessica was at work. I took the day off, carefully selecting items with sentimental value, photos of my dad, his old watch, my MMA trophies she'd insisted we hide away because they seemed too aggressive. Then came the confrontation. I prepared her favorite dinner, salmon with roasted vegetables and white wine. She came home, surprised by the romantic setup. "What's the occasion?" she asked, tossing her keys on the counter. "Just felt like doing something nice," I replied, pouring her a glass of wine. "How was your day?" "Busy, stressful. The usual." She checked her phone again, probably messaging Jim before sitting down. We ate in relative silence until I finally spoke. "I need to talk to you about something important." She sighed dramatically. "Can it wait?" "I'm exhausted." "No, it can't." I placed the folder on the table between us. "I know about the affair." Her expression cycled rapidly through shock, denial, and calculation before settling on indignation. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder and laid out the evidence piece by piece, the hotel receipts, text message screenshots, restaurant bills, phone records. "You went through my phone," she snapped, attempting to flip the script. "That's a complete invasion of privacy." "Yes, I did," I admitted calmly. "After years of your emotional abuse and public humiliation, I finally listened to my instincts." She laughed incredulously. "Abuse? Are you serious right now?" "I've supported you through everything," I countered. "You've belittled me at every opportunity. You've mocked my height, my performance in bed, my career, all while sleeping with some deadbeat who lives in his parents' basement." Her eyes widened. "You don't know anything about Jim." "I know enough. I know he's 35 and lives with mommy and daddy. I know his father's a pastor who would probably be fascinated to learn what his son has been up to. I know he's not even on your company payroll despite you listing him as a work contact." Her strategy shifted instantly. Tears formed in her eyes. "I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. We can work through this. The affair is just one part of why this marriage is over," I explained, maintaining my composure. "Even without it, I wouldn't stay with someone who treats me with such contempt." She reached across the table for my hand. I pulled back. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "I've been under so much pressure at work." He was just there. It was a moment of weakness. 7 months of moments, I corrected her. "And the things you said about me." Her tears vanished instantly, replaced by cold fury. "Fine. You want the truth?" "Yes, I've been unhappy." "What did you expect? You never satisfied me, not financially, not emotionally, not physically." I nodded, almost relieved to finally hear her honest thoughts. "That's exactly why I'm leaving. I deserve better than someone who sees me that way." "You," she scoffed. "Better than me? Good luck finding anyone who will put up with your limitations." She gestured dismissively at my crotch. "By limitations, do you mean my inability to detect bullshit? Because that's definitely improved recently. Or maybe you mean my limitation of believing my wife when she said she loved me. That one's cured too." Her face contorted with anger. "You think this is funny? You think you can just walk away from me?" "I'm not walking away from you," I corrected her. "I'm walking away from this." I gestured between us. "This isn't a marriage. It's a performance, and I'm done playing my part. I've already filed for divorce through Janet. I'll be staying elsewhere until it's finalized." In that moment, looking at her beautiful face twisted with cruelty, I felt a strange sense of peace. This woman had never loved me. She'd only loved controlling me, diminishing me. "You'll never make it without me," she hissed, her mask completely fallen now. "You were nothing when I met you. I made you who you are." I laughed at that, genuinely amused. "Is that what you tell yourself? That the regional manager with his own house and car was nothing? That the guy everyone at work respects was nothing? That's some impressive revisionist history." I walked toward the door where I'd stashed my overnight bag earlier. She rushed after me, grabbing my arm. Wait. We need to talk about this. You can't just throw away 9 years. You threw them away, I replied firmly, removing her hand. One comment, one lie, one betrayal at a time. As I walked to Mike's truck waiting at the end of the block, I could hear her following me to the porch, her voice shifting between rage and desperation. You think this is some kind of movie moment, she shouted. You think you're teaching me a lesson? Get back inside. I kept walking, not looking back. Please, she called, softer now. I'm sorry. We can fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever you want. For a second, my steps faltered, 9 years of habit nearly pulling me back into her orbit. She doesn't look happy, Mike observed as we drove away. She's not used to losing control, I replied. That was 2 weeks ago. Now I'm staying at Mike's while Janet handles the divorce proceedings. Jessica's been alternating between threatening messages and desperate pleas for reconciliation. But for the first time in years, I can see clearly. And I'm never going back to that life again. Update 2, it's been 6 months since my last update, and everything has changed in ways I never imagined. The divorce was finalized faster than expected. Jessica didn't contest it once she realized I wouldn't return. Janet proved to be worth every penny, ensuring a fair division of assets. I didn't try to take Jessica to the cleaners, even though I probably could have. I just wanted to move forward with my life. The house sold quickly in a hot market. After splitting the proceeds, I had enough to place a down payment on a sleek downtown condo closer to my office. 2 bedrooms, industrial style with exposed brick and big windows, the complete opposite of the suburban McMansion we'd lived in. This place actually feels like me, not just another stage for Jessica's performances. My career has taken an unexpected turn for the better. Mr. Wilson called me into his office shortly after the divorce was final. I thought it might be about Jessica's dramatic appearance at work. She'd shown up unannounced, crying and causing a scene until security escorted her out, but instead, he offered me a promotion I never saw coming. The Chicago office needs someone who can handle difficult situations, he said, leaning back in his chair. Someone with resilience. I've watched how you've handled everything these past months, never letting it affect your work, maintaining professionalism even when things got messy. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need there. The position came with a 40% salary increase and full relocation support. I accepted immediately. It felt right, new city, new start, clean break from the past. My first week in Chicago, I closed a deal that 3 previous managers had failed to secure. Turns out all those years of handling difficult personalities had given me skills I didn't even realize I had. My new team actually respects my input and values my contributions. Last week, we landed a major client, and my colleagues took me out to celebrate. No backhanded compliments, no subtle put-downs, just genuine appreciation for good work. It's amazing how much more you can achieve when you're not constantly being torn down by someone who's supposed to support you. I've started MMA training again at a local gym. My trainer says I'm in better shape now than guys 10 years younger. The physical outlet has been therapeutic in ways I never expected. There's something empowering about reclaiming something Jessica used to mock as too aggressive and embarrassing. Next month, I'm entering my first amateur competition in years. As for Jessica, life has a way of balancing the scales. Her pharmaceutical company downsized her division 2 months after our separation. Turns out her boss had been protecting her mediocre performance because they were having an affair too. When his wife found out and threatened divorce, he ended things with Jessica, and she was the first one cut in the layoffs. Jim never came back from his brother's place in Ohio. Apparently, living without his parents' support wasn't as easy as he'd thought. Last I heard, he's working part-time at a small gym, still dreaming of becoming a fitness influencer at 35. His Instagram following hasn't quite hit triple digits yet. The most revealing conversation came from Jessica's sister last week. She reached out wanting to meet for coffee. Over lattes, she shared something that put everything into perspective. Jessica's always been like this, she said, stirring her coffee nervously. She did the same thing to her college boyfriend, made him feel worthless until he believed it. She's been doing this since high school, actually. Finding someone successful, breaking them down, then moving on when they stop feeding her ego. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked. She looked down, ashamed. I tried once, years ago. She didn't speak to me for an entire year afterward. Cut me out completely, turned our whole family against me with her version of events. I guess I was a coward. I'm sorry. Through Mike, I heard Jessica's been telling everyone who'll listen that I had a mental breakdown, that I was controlling and abusive, that she's the real victim. Classic Darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. But here's the thing, people who knew us, who saw how she treated me over the years, they know the truth. My new life isn't perfect, but it's authentically mine. I've been on a few dates, nothing serious yet, but it's nice to remember what it feels like to be appreciated for who you are. To be able to express an opinion without bracing for criticism. To share a success without it being diminished. The other day, I found my dad's old watch while unpacking. It brought back something else he used to say, sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is walk away from a fight he could win, to win the war with himself instead. That's what this was really about, not winning against Jessica, but winning back myself. Each day I wake up in my new place, head to my new job, and live my life on my own terms, I'm winning that war. The peace I feel now is worth more than any facade of a perfect marriage ever was. To those who might be in a similar situation, whether you're a man or a woman, remember that leaving an abusive relationship isn't weakness. It's strength. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves, and the greatest victories are the moments we choose our own happiness over someone else's control. The response to my previous posts has been overwhelming. Your comments and messages helped me recognize patterns I was too close to see. To those who shared similar stories, you gave me strength when I needed it most. To those still in similar situations, your messages about how my story helped you find your own courage mean more than you know. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in years, I'm excited to find out. I'm dating again, cautiously. Building new friendships. Rediscovering old passions. Most importantly, I'm learning to trust my own judgment again. This will be my final update. Thank you all for being part of my journey to freedom. Remember, you're worth more than someone else's attempts to diminish you. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.